Whether it's, a small group of 2 or 3 people or a large, multinational organization, no one's totally figured it out. Everyone deals with a little bit of dysfunction, a little bit of division, a little bit of drama. That's normal. And the question, though, I think we have to ask ourselves is, are we getting better? If the answer is no, again, give yourself a bit of grace. And what are we going to do about it?
Start to think through what are some areas where I do experience tension or frustration, or just like this isn't going well, and might need to break up with this client, or I might need to break up with this employee. But you're saying like, yeah, when you feel that or you sense that, like lean into that and like what is the tension and what can you learn from that, and obviously have a discussion about that.
We're losing our ability to lean into differences, and we mistakenly are feeling like if you maybe oppose my idea, not only are you wrong, you're bad. Yeah. First and foremost, they still live in a world with right and wrong and good and bad, and you're dealing with problems to solve where there's a right answer. Pick the right answer, be done with it. We also have to recognize, though, we live in a world with right and right, where we could look at the exact same thing and see it from different perspectives and both be right.
On episode 397 of this podcast, we talk about how to balance confidence and humility as a leader without coming across as a jerk or a pushover. We also share the secret sauce to creating a high-performance culture that still values grace and understanding. And finally, why leaning into healthy tension can give you a competitive edge in today's business world. Plus, my guest Tim, he's gonna share a powerful story that'll make you rethink how you approach challenges in your own business. Trust me, you're not gonna wanna miss this one. What's up, friend? Hey, welcome to the Grow Your Video Business Show. I am Ryan Coral, your host, and I'm super excited that you are here. This is a great episode. Tim Arnold, great guest, brought the heat, and I've got the beat. Here we go. Okay. Hey, if you don't know me, it is a pleasure to meet you. I've been running my own video production business in the Metro Detroit area since 2004. I'm coming up on 20 years officially in October, and I've bumped my leg. I've got a lot of bruises. I have a lot of bruises and a lot of scars from running a business this long. And it's been fun. It's been really challenging, but it's been really good. And this show is really designed for me to introduce you to some of the incredible people that I know and tap into their expertise. And also, I've actually learned some things over 20 years in running my own video production business, and hopefully you can learn from me as well. I'm excited to have you inside of our little corner of the world, and I want to invite you to something really special that you might not have ever heard of before, called the Onward Summit. This is an event that we do once a year at our studio in Lake Orion, Michigan, and we host other filmmakers from around the globe, literally from around the globe. And this coming October 6th through the 8th, we're getting together again, and we're gonna be hanging out at our studio, learning together, growing together, networking, collaborating, the friendships that are formed, the amazing conversations that are had. It's really, really good, really valuable if you're in this space, and especially if you're in a space where you're like, man, I'm feeling alone and isolated. I've got things to learn, areas to grow in my business. I've got so many questions. It's the perfect place to be. And also, it's a great place to be if you feel like, man, everything's going great in this video business, because there are a lot of people that would love to sit next to you, have a meal with you, and ask you some questions. So if any of that sounds interesting or good, the doors are open. You can register, you can save your spot, and right now, I think is the best time. There's early bird rates and stuff like that going on. Head over to studiosherpas.com/onward, and you can get all of the details and lock in your spot there and get the biggest discount of this event. This might also be the last one that I do, at least for a little while. Doing 5 of these, it takes a lot of work, and I'm working on some sponsors so that I can help offset some of the costs, so that this becomes like, something I can do and not feel like it's gonna hurt my pocketbooks so much. But anyway, it is a great event. It's gonna be super fun. Would love to have you, and that's all I have to say about that. Now, let's get into today's episode, the reason why you're here, and me too, okay? Maybe not like the reason, why you're like here, but like why you're why you're here right now. Okay, let's go. What's up, friends? Hey, welcome to another episode. With me today is Tim Arnold, who is the president of Leaders for Leaders. Tim, super excited for you to be here. Thank you, all the way from, I'd say another part of the world, but it's really just like across like a river for me. I'm sort of close to you, but welcome to the show.
Great to be here. International guest does sound better, but we're really like a few hours away. So great to be here from north of the border.
Yes, and you know it's lost its luster. International guest at my in-person event, like that's kind of impressive, even though it is right across the river. But international on a virtual call, really, like is that something I'm going to try to promote? Like,
it loses a bit,
right?
For sure.
So I would love for you to just give us a glimpse of what does your work look like?
What does my work look like? So I have the privilege, usually a number of days a week, of working with leaders around the world, often also the teams that they're part of, and help them get stronger, face some challenges and even conflicts head on so that they can move through it with trust built and relationships stronger. The sad thing is, you probably know this based on past experiences, most organizations deal with just a lot of unnecessary division and dysfunction. I get to come in and not solve it, because as humans, we'll always have challenges when we work together. But learn how to lean into it and learn to work better together. Look forward to Monday mornings as opposed to dread them.
Oh man, I tell you what, just a quick side story. My first full-time employee, this is back in like late 2008, 2009. I was not a great leader and didn't even like to call my employee that. I just, or I didn't want to be called a boss. I was just like, I wanted to be on the same level. And eventually it came to bite me in the rear end, because I didn't clarify our roles and his role clearly enough. And he just assumed that we were on the same level, which was a perfect assumption, because I did not do a great job of being very clear in my communication and expectations. And so much so that he would do things that I'm like, you are acting like the boss in this whole thing. And then I had other employees. And so it got really weird inside of the company, because people would look at me and then they would look at this guy and they'd be like, wait, okay, we think we know Ryan's the boss, but like he's acting like the boss. And it got so bad that I would go to work. And when you said this, it just like brought back, I would drive, I would get into the parking lot and I'd see his car and I'd just be like, here we go. And that was the worst. I mean, there was a season, probably months, where I just dreaded like working with this person, and I felt like I had to keep him, and like he was, he knew all of the things, and goodness gracious, I was so wrong. And I'm so glad I had a business coach at that time in my life to just teach me through all of the mistakes and the things that he was doing that frustrated me, to say like, he's your greatest teacher right now. And I'm like, oh, that's so annoying, but that sounds like something a business coach should say. And I did learn so much. So anyway, I'm on the same page. I would have been a perfect client for you. You would have been perfect to come in and kind of just help us get in alignment. So thanks for coming today.
Well, it's interesting too. And whether it's, a small group of 2 or 3 people or a large, multinational organization, no one's totally figured it out. I've worked with organizations ranging from small startups to the United Nations. Everyone deals with a little bit of dysfunction, a little bit of division, a little bit of drama. That's normal. And the question, though, I think we have to ask ourselves is, are we getting better? Like when I look at the way we are now compared to even a season ago, would we feel like we're more aligned than we were? Would we feel like we're more trusting than we were? And if the answer is yes, I think that's a high five. That's a win. Let's keep going. If the answer is no, again, give yourself a bit of grace. And what are we going to do about it? I again am able to, the privilege of going into organizations and just making sure we're getting better and moving in the right direction.
Yeah. So like, what's like a common, because here's the thing, like when I had this employee, it wasn't for months and months that I realized like there was some major dysfunction, but had I don't know, been paying attention to other things, I probably would have noticed and or been triggered to say like, we need to do something about this. Instead of, my reaction was like, I don't want to rock the boat. Like, this person is like pretty key to our small team. And I'm not afraid to confront people, but my fear was that he would quit or I'd have to fire him, and I'm not ready to. So what are some warning signs or things that maybe people think everything's hunky-dory, like everything's kind of fine, but in reality, there's probably some unhealthy things going on inside the culture?
It's a great question, and it's funny that you kind of want the answer, because I think paradoxically one of the challenges is that we think there's this silver bullet solution, or there's this kind of miracle cure, and if I can just read that book, or if I can just if I can just plug in that formula,
this episode,
we're good. And sorry to say,
come on, man.
I know. What I would say though is, I talk a lot about the idea as professionals, we have to recognize that there's certain elements in life that are problems to solve, which means there's a solution.
Yeah.
What camera am I going to buy?
That's good.
Am I going to do a podcast or not? Those are problems to solve. Make this decision, you're done. But then there's other challenges that we face that I refer to as tensions to manage, meaning that it's not this or that, it's this and that.
Yeah.
And, in my book, Lead with And, I narrowed it down to kind of 6 unavoidable tensions that, as a leader, you will face. Now, when I say leader, that doesn't necessarily mean you're leading people, but you're moving things forward. Whether you're a solopreneur or you are leading a team, you're moving things forward. And out of the 6, I would say when you're sensing a little bit of division or dysfunction, or just you feel stuck, like know where you want to go, but it just doesn't feel like you're getting there, normally one of those tensions is off. So I don't know this to be true, but even based on what you had said, one of those tensions I talk about is the tension between confidence and humility. And it's not about the compromise or meeting in the middle.
Yeah.
It's how do I do both fully? How do I be someone who is fully confident, in that you can say, hey, this is the way things are going. You can follow me. You can trust me, and fully humble, which doesn't mean you assume you're wrong. It just means you got a growth mindset. Like you're always looking at how can I learn? How can I adapt? And with these tensions to manage, like with problems to solve, you pick an answer, you're done, you move on. With a tension to manage, it's almost like breathing. Inhaling and exhaling is a package deal. I can't wake up in the morning and say, inhale today. Doesn't work.
Right.
And we know with breathing, if I pick one side and I neglect the other, I'm going to be blue in the face pretty quick. And with these tensions to manage, the same is true. At the end of the day, with confidence and humility, if I just lean into one side and I neglect the other, I guarantee it won't work long term. So as you probably know, if you're overly confident but you lack humility, that's actually cockiness and arrogance. And that's not leadership that people look up to or want to follow. But here's my guess. In your case, when you really value and try to be a humble leader, but you do that maybe neglecting a bit of confidence, that actually is leadership that people don't follow either. Ugh. And people start to fill in the gaps on their own. And there's a bit of a leadership vacuum. So it's not about kind of meeting in the middle. It's how do I show up in a way that's fully confident and fully humble. And, again, I can't give you the formula, but I bet if we could play back the tapes, you could have maybe kept your eye on that tension a little bit better, that may have made a pretty big difference.
Yeah, that's brilliant, man. I don't know how many years I was in business before I just realized I need to own the fact that I am the owner. Right. And like, it's okay, Ryan, that you have employees. You don't need to be the cool guy. Like, hey, I want to be the boss that's relatable, the cool boss and whatever. I do want that. But I think I learned the hard way that I really had to say, guys, these are the expectations. These are the hopes. I don't want to be the one that's, when I hired an operations person, that was the best because I could be a lot more the, hey, I'm the cool, like, hey, yeah, if you screwed up, you're going to hear from Lindsay. She's going to, bring out the, disciplining and all that stuff. I don't need to do that anymore. But at the same time, like, I've hired her because I want her to do what I don't want to do, which is make sure that everybody's accountable for the things. And when I finally started owning that idea of I am the CEO, this is not a hobby. This is a legitimate business. People's livelihoods are at stake, including my own. And so I just got to step into this, lean into that tension of like I am gaining more confidence. You know, I think for a long time I faked it till I maked it. That's good English. I've always had that humility side where I'm like, I'm humble, I'm hungry, I want to learn, I want to grow. Give me pushback, give me feedback. And I would say today I'm a lot more like the best version of myself where I do carry both of those. I think not equally, but so much better than what it used to be.
Yeah, and it's not about even proportion. It's just saying, I feel like right now, I and those around me are getting the benefits of both confidence and humility.
Yeah.
And that may be weighted on one side or the other. But if I over-focus on one and I neglect the other, it's like inhaling and holding it. It just won't work long term.
Yeah.
Similarly, one of the other 6 kind of unavoidable tensions, I call expectations and grace, meaning that on the expectation side, I need to be. And what's interesting, and my guess is your audience would resonate with, most of the time we start with setting high expectations on ourselves. We push ourselves, we set goals, we have high standards. If we lead teams, we want to have expectations on them and we want to have deliverables. And what I would say is if it's all expectations and no grace, no one wants to work with you.
Yeah.
People actually check out because they realize I can't win here. Like we're never there. So, and I've learned this the hard way. There's the inhale or exhale continuum. The other side is grace, which is understanding and acceptance and factoring in, life matters. And, what's interesting, and I'm sure you've experienced this many times, if you want a trusting culture, and this is just relationships, even one-on-one, if we want to have a real authentic relationship, there has to be that grace and acceptance. And as you probably experienced, if we overdo grace and we kind of abdicate expectations, actually people don't tap into the best versions of themselves. Yeah. And there's a kind of a culture of mediocrity, which means we're good, we're fine.
Yeah.
And when that happens, your high performers leave because they want to be pushed.
Right.
So, as we tap into kind of the best versions of ourselves and the best versions of our organizations, when we say, how do we create a culture that's high expectations and high grace? And when you're around that type of a culture, it's attractive. And you want to hang out there.
I mean, to be totally honest, and I look at like my career, especially probably the last decade, my expectation, man, I have such high expectations for myself, always pushing and always wanted to grow and always wanted to improve. And my assumption is that that's how everybody else should be, right? Everybody else is like that, right? But then you have kids. I don't know if you have kids.
I do, yeah.
Then you have teenagers, and it's like, come on, I need you to get after it, want it. You got to want it, right? Thinking back to my days in high school playing football, it was like, that was it. Like I would not have played football if I didn't want to win a state championship. Right. I wanted this thing so bad. And then same thing when I started my business. I'm not starting this business just because this is cool to do, but I want to win. What does that mean? It's like, I don't know. I want to make the coolest video. I want to grow as a filmmaker. I want to grow as a business person. I want to book a, $5,000 job. I want to book a $10,000. Could I book $100,000? What, where can I grow? And can I hire a team? And can I have other people do this work? And can I teach people and train people? And so my expectations have just become so high of myself, but then inevitably it's just it oozes from me.
Yeah, well, what's interesting, and I have to tell you that maybe not on the football side because the skills weren't there, but on most levels I can resonate with what you're saying. And it was interesting because out of the 6 tensions that I talk about, expectations and grace has been probably the one that I've had to focus on the most because it doesn't just manage itself. It doesn't just manage itself by chance. It's only by choice. I have to lean into it. And normally it's to lean into the grace side of things. The acceptance, the factoring in. Life happens sometimes. And when I was writing the chapter on expectations, grace, I felt like I had to do a lot of research because I I didn't have the kind of innate expertise.
Right.
But chatting with a number of people that really have done a lot of work on understanding and acceptance and grace.
Yeah.
And one colleague, she's out of the University of Louisville, Shonda Irving, and she just said, like, I can tell you, I've done the research, like, it's pretty hard to have grace and acceptance for others until you have it with yourself.
Oh, man.
So you can fake it and you can kind of make it look grace based, but really it starts with yourself, which was kind of like oh darn.
Yeah.
So there's always work to be done, but it's been a great journey. And again, I still manage that tension with a bias towards expectations, but I've learned, and I'm learning, that when you, and it's not trade-offs, it's not, darn it, now I got to lower my expectations. It's actually a bit of a paradox, because the more I've been able to integrate grace and understanding with myself and with my team and others, actually the higher the expectations can be, because people really respond. So, you know, it's not 50-50. It's not meet in the middle. It's how do I do both fully?
I want to learn more. So can you paint a picture for us that's like, hey, here's a good example of expectations and grace. This is something actually you've worked through or
I will. So I'll give you a bit of a story that would be an example for me. So I don't even think you know this, but many years ago, I spent a decade leading a 40-bed homeless shelter. And in the shelter, I came from corporate, so it was a big shift for me. 2 years in, we were seeing amazing things happen in people's lives and in the community. I will tell you, though, that as the leader, as the executive director, about 2 years in, I had this ongoing frustration because there was just a small group of individuals who, and I'm talking out of the 900 to 1,000 people who came into our facility every year, like 5 or 6 people. But they would come in and get suspended and come back. And when I would show up and see them, I go, oh, because getting suspended for, theft or drug use or fighting, that's normal. But these individuals would always take people down with them. So finally, I came to a place where I said to my team, it was a small leadership team, folks, I think we got to make a policy change. I think we've got to implement a lifetime ban. Only on a few people, like we're talking, I could count them on my one hand.
Wow, yeah.
But let's be honest, we're not helping these people.
Yeah.
And they're not helping our community.
Yeah.
So now, going back to confidence and humility, confidently, I brought that to the table because I believed it.
Yeah.
At the same time, I also knew that I was asking for a policy change that affirmed my bias towards high expectations. So as much as I wanted to bring that to the table, I also needed the humility to then shut up and just be open.
Yeah.
And what was fascinating was, I made my case, and no one agreed with me. No one. And I was shocked by that. I thought that actually most people would.
Yeah.
No one agreed. There was pretty strong consensus that we need to make some changes.
Yeah.
No one agreed with the lifetime ban. So anyways, I'm going to kind of jump ahead of it. That day, we had about an hour and a half of like a real animated, emotional meeting.
Yeah.
Didn't make the policy change. 7 years later, my wife and I are driving to the local university. There's a community event happening. We're late because there's so many people. We couldn't get parking. So I'm at the top of this 1,000-person auditorium, looking down. And it was an event to educate the public in Canada about residential schools. And if you don't know about that history, we had a really horrific part of our history in Canada where we took Indigenous children out of their homes and put them in these kind of white religious schools to kind of indoctrinate them in, non-Indigenous ways of living.
Yeah.
And this went on for like decades.
Ugh.
I knew a little bit about residential schools, but I didn't know much. And that night was like eye-opening. There were speakers from across the country. But what was interesting was when I looked down, the person who was leading this event was actually the person that made me want to get the lifetime ban. His name was Darcy. He'd been in our shelter countless times. And Darcy was like the poster child for the person that I wanted the lifetime ban for. And what I didn't know many years earlier was Darcy was actually a child of residential schools. I also learned that, what he was experiencing when I knew him at that stage was not uncommon for people who had that much trauma and abuse in their life. And, it was interesting because Darcy didn't get the lifetime ban, thankfully.
Yeah.
Came back to the shelter, connected with volunteers, slowly but surely went back to school, went on to university, got a university degree. Here we are 7 years later. He's leading these events across the country, helping people like me understand things I would never have known. And I remember looking down that day at Darcy thinking, I am so glad I didn't get my way that day. Like, I'm so glad that I was able to work in an environment that leaned into tension in a healthy way, that didn't need to agree, that we could actually have a good heated discussion on like, I just don't agree, or I think there's a better way. And because unless you can wrestle with those tensions, you don't make decisions that result in nights like tonight. And, it was also a reminder to me that day, I will probably live all of my days having a bias towards expectations, but nights like this don't happen unless you can integrate it with grace.
Yeah.
And thankfully I had people around me that helped me with that.
Yeah.
But I think some of the best moments in life and work show up when we can navigate that tension in a real healthy way.
Oh, that's a powerful story, powerful example. I thought you were going to be more like, yeah, one day I was sitting in my cubicle and, I just had these high expectations and then I leaned over. Wow. What a great story. How does that, like when you think about Darcy? Yeah, when you think about him in that story, how does it make you feel today thinking about that?
Darcy and I stay in contact. He actually is living in an hour away in Toronto. He's works at a men's shelter and still doing work across the country. And he's just a wonderful friendship that reminds me of, as I said, the work that I do is encouraging professionals and leaders and teams to lean into healthy tension.
Yeah.
And he's just a good reminder that unless you're willing to kind of lean into some complexity and tension, these types of life change and friendships and some of the best experiences of your life just won't happen. Like when we ultimately want everything to, we live in a very either or world right now where it's kind of my views, my side, and then we find people on our side and kind of assume that anyone on the other side's wrong, at least up north of the border. That may not be the case in the US, but
I'm pretty sure.
And it's not going so well. And yet I think more than ever before in my lifetime, leaders and professionals who can certainly have strong views and values, and at the same time recognize that my truth isn't the truth, and that I don't actually have to give up my values and my beliefs to expand them. I can hold on, and I work with leaders, and I even try to live my life with strong principles and values, and I'm always looking to grow and expand. And what's interesting is, this is true not only at the boardroom table, it's true at the dinner table. Like if I'm ultimately spending most of my time with people on my side, I feel good, but I stop learning. Like the best learning in my life actually comes from healthy conflict. And it comes from conversations that make me feel a bit defensive because it's pushing my boundaries a bit. And again, I would expect that you experience this as well. We're losing our ability to lean into differences and and we mistakenly are feeling like if you maybe oppose my idea, not only are you wrong, you're bad. So, I work as hard as I can to say, first and foremost, we still live in a world with right and wrong and good and bad. And when you're dealing with problems to solve where there's a right answer, pick the right answer, be done with it. We also have to recognize, though, we live in a world with right and right, where we could look at the exact same thing and see it from different perspectives and both be right. And if we can lean into that, going back to the Darcy situation, when we had that boardroom conversation and I said, hey, I feel like we've got a problem here. Here's my solution. No one disagreed that we had a problem. Just no one agreed with my proposal. So what we did is say, hey, we all know we need to have more accountability, more consequences around here. But rather than see it from an either or perspective, I had 6 team members that brought their perspective that was all a bit different. And rather than seeing it as a win-lose, we left just saying, hey, let's just come up with let's not look at this as right and wrong. Let's just pick the best option for us right now. And, when we can do that, and, I got to say, this is, I think, true for the solopreneur that's just trying to kind of stand out from the pack, or people leading teams. If you can encourage kind of the culture of your teams and your relationships to lean into tension, to not need to surround yourself with people who see everything the way you see it, it's a competitive edge right now. Certainly keeping me in business, I'll tell you that much.
That's an interesting way to put it. It's a competitive edge. Most everybody is, if we were all ice cream, we'd be all vanilla, right? Because we don't want to rock the boat. And we're afraid that somebody's going to hear the wrong thing, or we, nothing can be reconciled. And it's like, oh, you're on that side, I'm on this side, so can't work together. And it's a lot more opportunity there than most of us think.
So much opportunity. I mean, there's, again, if we can continue to be individuals and leaders and be in teams that can, pick the right answer when there's a right or wrong, and rise above that when it's complex, to say, wow, there's a lot of different approaches here. Let's pick the best approach for us right now. It's a bit of a lost art, and it just makes all the difference. And as I said, regardless of who's listening, as a professional, there are some unavoidable tensions, situations that aren't either or. They force you to lean into and I believe if you want to start to really see exceptional results and lead with resilience, where you kind of feel like you're showing up well. You learn how to kind of lead with and lean into that healthy tension. I've done research around the world, actually, around the word tension. And, I've asked people, thousands of people, I say tension, you think what? Or the equivalent of tension in other languages. And not surprisingly, about 95% around the world give me negative answers. Shoulder pain, headaches, conflict, dysfunction. And certainly there's negative forms of tension, but the tensions that I'm talking about, things like expectations and grace, confidence and humility, profit and purpose. These are great tensions. These are the tensions that we don't want to avoid because we are scared of them. We want to lean into them. And my encouragement to your audience is, start to identify one or two of these underlying tensions. You're feeling them already, but name them. And then say, hey, I'm not going to solve this, but we're going to really leverage it. We're going to lean into it.
That's very good. I was gonna have you wrap with okay, so if I'm a person who hasn't maybe practiced this idea of how do I start? So start to think through what are some areas where I do experience tension, or frustration, or just this isn't going well, and this might need to break up with this client, or I might need to break up with this employee. But you're saying when you feel that, or you sense that, lean into that, and what is the tension, and what can you learn from that, and obviously have a discussion about that, and then also say you can be right, and
we could see this from a different perspective and not be on the same page, but ultimately want the same higher purpose. How are we going to navigate that to get to that higher purpose? Because that we share. Good. And I mean, going back to kind of the state of our culture, unfortunately right now we believe that, most people are on this side and most people are on this side. And if you're on this side and I'm on this side, we have nothing in common. And you and I both know, I bet we have 95% of our core values in common. I bet what we want for our families, for our communities, is almost the same. There's about 5% that we're not in this sync with. And sadly, we've got so fixated on that 5 or 6% that we start to assume that it's literally an either or world, and it's not. So as you said, I think anytime you've got a chronic issue, anytime there's a team meeting and someone brings up a concern, in the back of your mind, you're thinking, are we still talking about this? Anything that's ongoing, it's probably not a problem to solve. So the question then is, let's name it, kind of like your situation. Oh, you know what? I'm trying to lead with humility, but I also need to lead with confidence. In our homeless shelter, hey, I'm trying to push the boundaries on kind of having high expectations, but I also need to have high levels of grace.
Yeah.
And once you name the tension, and there's lots of them, there's, embracing change, but holding on to stability, really being an organization that's kind of purpose driven. We start with why, but we also are profit driven and we keep our eye on the bottom line.
Yeah.
Like these are those chronic issues that if we can name them and just manage them in a healthy way, we're going to really start to move forward.
Dude, so good. I love the work that you're doing. This is really great. How can people follow along with all the things Tim Arnold is up to?
So, you know what the easiest thing would be? It's Tim Arnold, not Tom Arnold, not Tim Allen, Tim Arnold, and .ca, not .com. I'm in Canada, so timarnold.ca. And if you go there, I have quite a few free resources you can tap into. There's a really simple, less than 20-minute online course if you want to just kind of get the basics of leading with and healthy tension. So you can kind of download that course. You'll get information about myself and my books. And so, yeah, probably just check out timarnold.ca. I also tend to hang out on LinkedIn and Instagram. So Tim Arnold Leadership. Those are the best ways to stay in touch.
Yeah, awesome. Tim, thanks so much. I appreciate you, man. Thank you for the work that you're doing, and wishing you a lot more success here in the future.
Well, thank you. You made me commit to having fun, and I had fun. So thanks for being the guide of fun.
Winning. I like it. Awesome, my friend. Thanks so much.
Care.
Thanks for hanging out, friend. Super glad that you made it this far. And don't forget, the Onward Summit's coming up October 6th through the 8th at our studio in Orion Township, AKA Lake Orion. You can get all the info, all the deets at studiosherpas.com/onward. Would love for you to consider it. And don't, if you're feeling like, man, I should look into this, do it now. Check it out now. Don't wait until spots fill up. It's designed to be a smaller event. So we will close the doors and not allow, it's gonna be less than 50 people is what we're allowing. So, and this being the last one potentially, and I'm not just saying that to create like false scarcity, I'm really gonna, after this event, look at my future and the things that I wanna be doing, and does this still fit? Is it profitable? Can I keep doing it? Is it sustainable? All those things. So I didn't get into running a video business 20 years ago to do events, but I found I love doing events, and man, if I could figure out how to make them profitable, I'd probably just host parties and events and have my friends all get together, and it'd be great. So, okay, reach out if you need anything. My email is ryan@studiosherpas.com. You can like this video, leave a comment if there was something helpful, if you have a takeaway. Love reading those and seeing those. So thanks for being here, and I will see you on the next episode. Bye for now.